All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. We appreciate all of you joining for this relevant and timely topic. I'm excited to introduce Alex Cavallari as the head of marketing at Sign Investments. And that's where he oversees really all aspects under their marketing umbrella. He's also a co-founder of Seven Group, which is a platform that enables financial advisors to market their practices more effectively. Prior to joining Scion Investments and launching Seven Group, Alex served as a VP at BlackRock. He wore a few different hats there, but he was primarily responsible for developing a digital experience within their retirement marketing division and participated in their campus recruiting efforts. Alex received a degree in communications and rhetorical studies from Syracuse University. In addition, I do want to take the opportunity to remind everyone of a couple of outdoor upcoming events that we have planned for our member base. The first one is Friday, June 25th. It's our annual meeting at the Detroit Tigers game. We'll have, some light appetizers or hors d'oeuvres and a brief presentation at the DAC just before the game, which starts around 7. And then the additional event that we have is on Tuesday, July 20th. It's our summer golf outing at Oakland University. Registration for both of these events is on our website, and don't hesitate to let any of us or Michelle know if you have any questions about either of the upcoming events. Just a quick reminder to please add any questions you have via the Q&A panel at the lower in the lower toolbar of your Zoom screen, and we will be sure to address as many as we have time for. All right, well, without further ado, I'll go ahead and let Alex take it over.
Cool. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you everybody for joining me. So just for context, before I get going, I am a Detroit native. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Commerce, Michigan. I'm super excited to be here and talk to the society and talk to you about marketing. So as Ashley mentioned, Alex Cavallari, I run marketing for Scion. I also am a co-founder at Seven Group. So I work with a lot of advisors on their marketing strategy across the board. And I think, one of the things, if just for context on Scion, we're an alternatives investment manager. We have 2 core products. One's a joint venture partnership and interval fund with Ares Management, which is a diversified credit interval fund. So if you want to check out any of our solutions, just head to sioninvestments.com to learn more about us there. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about marketing. So where are we in this current environment? And I think these numbers are a little bit outdated, but obviously over the course of the past year, we're on the back end of this, but it's something that's really changed the way advisors do business across the board. It shifted all of us to digital first communications. It shifted all of us to a place where we need to reach clients differently, and we're attracting prospects into our firms differently, both as investment managers as well as financial advisors. And I think over the course of the past year, a lot of advisors have reacted to what's going on. They've either created new plans to actually create new distribution strategies or sales processes or marketing processes specific to adapt from COVID, or they onboarded new technologies, or they modified existing experiences. So whether they adapted their communication strategies or brought on new technology or built on additional communication strategies, a lot of advisors that we've seen, both small and large, really adapting to this new world of communications in a really big way. And what we've seen also too is that a lot of advisors that we work with, particularly on the Seven Group side, are seeing investors come to them and seeing prospects come to them who have been re-examining their current advisor and who have been looking at what their current advisor is providing them in terms of the resources, the information, and the communication to really help them navigate this time. I mean, if you even look in the past 24 hours, market headlines have been dominant with crypto, with the market dropping, and advisors that are actually taking advantage of communicating with their clients in a really effective manner are benefiting from this current environment in terms of strengthening those relationships. So when you think about marketing, at the end of the day, marketing does 3 things. When your marketing is working well, it does 3 things. It builds your brand as an advisor. It strengthens your relationships with current clients as well as current prospects, and it activates sales. And everything that you're doing should be always doing these 3 things as it relates to the goals that you're trying to accomplish from a marketing perspective. And we believe in it at Scion. We believe in, I believe in it personally. Obviously, for my whole career, we launched a business on it. But it's something where if you're doing your marketing well, you not just should see more prospects in the door, but you should be seeing lift across the board from a digital channel perspective. But at the end of the day, marketing at its core, it's about connecting with making valuable connections between the clients that you have, the products and the services that you offer, your brand, and the people that you have within the firm. And that's a big distinction that we make with advisor marketing, is that at the end of the day, someone who's becoming a client is buying from you as the individual. There may be some brand halo effect, but they're really connecting with that individual advisor that they've built that relationship with over time. And it influences financial decisions. So when you think about marketing, and these are some older stats that we like to use when we're talking to advisors about their marketing plan, but 62% of personal investors use online resources when making long-term financial decisions. This stat is from 2016 when we did a BlackRock investor pulse survey when I was at BlackRock, but that's obviously increased now. And then in addition to that, what we've seen is that people who are under 40 years old in a research study, I think it was either Broadridge that did the research study, but 70% of individuals under 40 years old are starting at Google when they're looking for a financial advisor, and 50+% of individuals under 40 years old are actually looking to LinkedIn. So people are jumping to these online channels to do research on topics. They're jumping to these online channels to do research on their advisor. And we're seeing advisors really thrive in this environment. So 84% of financial advisors use social media for business. That spans from advisors who are using it heavily and being very custom to the advisors who are doing more cookie cutter. But I think the more interesting statistic here is that 92% of these quote unquote social advisors have gained net new assets from these direct marketing activities. And marketing should be playing a key part of the funnel throughout the board. So when you think about the general sales funnel, you have your three core areas, depending on how you define the model. We use an ACEs model, but in here we'll use awareness, consideration, and purchase. But essentially how you're attracting people into the brand, obviously your content, your distribution, getting people into your digital properties is a big area we're going to talk about today. Getting people going from an unknown prospect into a known prospect is something we'll talk about as well. And then how do you actually start to cultivate those relationships, drive more referrals, and build more advocacy with your clients across the board. And I think in 2021, you think about this, your digital property is that everything flows through your digital experiences now. So if you're on social or you're running Google ads, you're optimizing your website for SEO, everything needs to come back to your digital channels to be able to educate and inspire people to actually take action. So that's just something to think about as it relates to your marketing strategy, is how are you optimizing your digital experience so people can, one, get educated on a specific topic, and then two, be able to contact you, sign up for something or download something to where you can continue to build that relationship with them over time. So when we think about the marketing content funnel, and as Ashley had mentioned, feel free to submit questions to the chat as we're going, or feel free and I can answer them as we're going. But when you think about your content across the sales funnel, there's really three areas of how you should be thinking about your content. And the most content you're going to create, the most volume of content you're going to create is at the top of the funnel. And I think a big misconception is that you need to be creating a ton of content on a daily basis, but it's not necessarily about that. But the key to think about is that most of the content that you are creating is going to live at the top. That's your blogs, that's your video series, that's your podcast series, that's your slideshows. Your webinars are really kind of top to mid funnel. So when you think about your content creation, the large majority of the content that you're going to be creating is going to be living at the top of the funnel. And then when you think about the consideration phase, your newsletters, your contact forms on your site, your webinars, your ebooks, those are things that you don't necessarily need to create a lot of, but you want to have one or two assets that you're creating on a quarterly or monthly basis to where you can distribute out to prospects, and also two, use to promote through your digital properties on your website. And then when you get into the purchase phase, what are those 1 or 2 assets that you need to bring those individuals through the goal line, bring those individuals into that client conversation? So that's your pitch decks, your onboarding materials, your one pagers, et cetera. And we'll get into what all this looks like and what all this means. So when you think about your marketing funnel and you think about your digital marketing funnel and how you can actually digitize your marketing funnel, there's really this idea of a flow, right? You're getting the broadest audience into the top of the funnel to understand who you are as an advisor, what value you bring to the table, and what topics you're actually an expert in. Getting them to a place where they've learned enough from you or they've seen enough from you to where they actually convert to becoming a known prospect. So whether they're signing up for a webinar, signing up for your newsletter, downloading a guide that you're promoting, and then ultimately getting them to a place where how do you engage them in a sales conversation? And we'll get into every element of these 3 parts of the funnel as we continue to talk through the strategy. But the baseline is, at the end of the day, marketing now is a core part of business development. And I think that's the biggest trend we've seen from advisors working with us on the 7 group side, and also the value add that we provide on the Scion side, is that it's not necessarily a bolt-on nice to have like it used to be, or it's not necessarily an extension of sales. It's in a lot of instances leading that sales charge or leading that communication charge for the advisor versus your more traditional strategies or tactics that you may have done in the past. So today we're going to talk about 4 core areas of building your marketing strategy. And this is a playbook, and we wanted to make it very tactical in the sense of you can take this away from this meeting, use this deck, use this replay, and actually be able to start to create your marketing strategy, your content strategy from scratch, without going external. So if you take one thing away, it's really how do you think about documenting and executing on these 4 areas. So it's unpacking your audience, ideate and creating content, distributing and partnering on that content, and how do you measure this on a regular basis. So we're going to start with unpacking your audience. So when we work with advisors, the biggest thing that we see is that a lot of times we jump right into content creation or we jump right into execution. And that's something where that only leads to frustration. We've seen it time and time again where advisors will come to us on the 7 group side and say, we're frustrated with our content. We've been doing it for a year and we haven't seen any results from an ROI perspective. We haven't seen any inbound leads on the site. We haven't seen any results from a marketing standpoint. The biggest thing that we usually tell those folks is that you have to take a step back before you start to create any marketing or start to execute on any marketing. So you have to really reverse engineer who you actually want to go after with your communications. So what we usually tell advisors and how we do it even internally is, what are the biggest things that your ideal customer profile cares about? And what you want to do is first define who that ideal customer profile is. So first, you probably heard you have to niche down, or what's your niche as an advisor. Our belief is that it's not necessarily about developing a niche per se. To us, it's more about how do you crystallize the customer that you're going after on a regular basis. And from that standpoint, what we think is the best approach to actually get this information is to go out to your current client base. So your top 10, 15, 20 clients that you can go out to and ask or survey with big questions. And it's not necessarily, this is outside of the regular quarterly meeting that you're doing or the yearly meeting that you're doing. This is really to get some information from them on what content they like to read, what topics do they like to think about, or what topics do they care about hearing from their advisor. And then also to what are the channels that they live on, and what types of media do they like to consume? Do they like to read? Do they like to watch videos? Do they like to listen to podcasts? So before you actually start to create that marketing strategy, then it's about thinking through what your ideal customer profile cares about and starting to develop the topics and the mediums that you need to live on and create on to be able to track those folks into your practice. So once you've done those interviews, those 10 to 15 interviews, you start to document and synthesize and extract that data. So it's really identifying what are the big themes across the board. Do 60% of your clients like to watch videos? And if that's the case, then that will give you good signal that you need to create a video series. Do 75% of your clients like to read timely information or timely content as it relates to the market? That will give you good signal as it relates to what topics people care about. So it's about taking a step back, reverse engineering, and starting defining who that ideal customer profile is, and then starting to create and document topics and types of content out of that before you start to create your content. Once you've done that, as it relates to your marketing strategy, you define that ideal customer profile and what they care about. Now you got to get into content creation. So a lot of the times we'll get into conversations with advisors and they'll ask, I need to be on Facebook, or I need to start running paid ads. And why you need to get to that place, a marketing strategy without content will always fall flat. If you don't have the content that you can cycle through, that you can get feedback on, if you're not in the mindset, or you're not creating from a content creation standpoint and developing that content creation muscle, your marketing will always end up losing steam, falling flat, and you won't be able to build on the momentum that you're creating with clients. So usually we start with, once you've understood all your customer needs, now it's time to map what your content should be for those individuals. So going back to our funnel, when we think about the top of funnel content, that's the type of content that's your foundational educational pieces, your timely pieces that you're creating, or your more lifestyle content. So when you're thinking about what types of pieces do you need to create at the top of the funnel, it can really fall into those three buckets: your educational, your thought leadership, and your lifestyle. And those are pieces that are going to help not only show your expertise, but also to help to really kind of pull back the curtain on who you are as the advisor and humanize the practice a little bit more. The second type of content is your middle funnel content. We already talked about this, but really getting to this place of, how are you pushing people through unknown to known? So is a website visitor turning into someone who subscribes to your newsletter? How is a website visitor turning into someone who signs up for your webinar? And then your bottom of the funnel content, which will bring them through that goal line. What are the sales assets that you need to create to actually get people to understand the processes that you have, or the philosophy that you have as an advisor? So top of funnel content is where you should double down on. And the top of funnel content is where we think you should be creating the most content. That content can be shared with both your clients as well as your prospects. But you need to have a consistent stream of value add content that you're putting out that's rooted in the person that you're trying to attract into your practice. Things that you need to make sure that you're checking off and cross-checking is that it's structured appropriately on your website. You have a home for this content. So whether that's your blog on your website, your YouTube page, you have a podcast within the Apple Podcast app, or you have another channel that you're hosting this content on, really figuring out where is the house for this content that you're going to be creating on a consistent basis. And then also too, what is the messaging in the kind of the style of that content that you're creating? So is it something where you take a more research oriented approach to your content creation, or is it something where you take a lighter approach? Again, that should be defined by the type of client that you're going after. So at the middle funnel, what you really need to do.
Can I ask you just a quick question as you continue to go through the different steps of the funnel? What type of person within an advisory practice are you typically seeing manage all of these different tasks and this brainstorming activity? Is this something that like the whole office is coming together on and really agreeing on, what their avatar might be? Or is it just kind of one person kind of, steering the ship?
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the practice. So if you have, on the 7 group side, where our sweet spot is the 50 to 500 million AUM advisor. So really either the solo shop or the advisor who has probably 3 to 4 people within their firm. From that perspective, the individual who's really leading the charge on defining the customer profile is either the lead advisor within the firm or someone who's going to run point on the marketing. And from that standpoint, if there are multiple people within the shop, or if there are multiple people within the practice, our philosophy is that everybody should, who's interacting with clients on a daily basis, should give input into who is the ideal customer profile for the practice. If it is a solo shop, that can just be determined. The key is to getting the feedback from the client base before you're defining any of your content strategy or distribution strategy, because that should shape it more so than the kind of the internal discussions.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
If you have time. So in some of the non-solo practice scenario, are you finding that, sometimes there may be, more than one lead advisor or more than one client facing contact where maybe they cater to individual niches within, the practice as a whole? Like at any point, do you see like separate communication might need to be developed, or are you looking to encourage those types of firms to really come up with a cohesive approach?
Yeah. So the way we think about it is that there's kind of this top line umbrella messaging and visual identity and value proposition of the practice. And from that standpoint, you could have more than one ideal customer profile defined in that. So we work with advisors who part of their practice is dedicated for corporate professionals, and then some of their practice is dedicated to small business owners. And from that standpoint, at the highest level of the umbrella, you want to make sure that within your website messaging, within your kind of your corporate messaging, that you're able to talk to both of those folks. And whether that's explicitly calling out, we work with entrepreneurs or small business owners and corporate executives, or that's just finding a consistent message where it doesn't necessarily call them out explicitly, but it kind of brings those two together in terms of the messaging on your digital properties. And then as it relates to the content strategy, what we usually advise on is they're parsing out their content strategy for the people that they're going after. So if there's a specific advisor focused on the corporate executive, then we would develop like a subset content strategy for that group. And then if there's another advisor focused on the small business owners, we would develop another subset content strategy. So you can have kind of parsing content strategies as long as you have it bubble up to that more cohesive umbrella at the practice level.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. So getting back to kind of the funnel and where we go within the top of funnel. So the top of funnel is your blogs, your podcast, your video series. Your mid funnel content is obviously the goal of your mid funnel content is to get someone to convert to a known prospect or convert to a newsletter subscriber. So from that standpoint, what are the assets you need to develop on a quarterly basis that you can promote to your prospect distribution list? You can leverage paid social media to get people into those assets. So that could be an on-demand webinar. We've seen on-demand webinars play really well over the course of the past year. The reason why on-demand versus live is that you can host them on your website and you don't have to worry about a registration number on a live date. You can just kind of promote it ongoingly on your website, kind of like your traditional webinar replay, but we call them more on demand. So we've seen those play really well. We've seen newsletters that are taking a very pointed approach in terms of the messaging, and it's not your like vanilla flavor newsletter to where you're starting to build almost like a referral engine for your clients that subscribe to that newsletter. Send it to friends and family because of the information that you're putting in it. And then also too, what are the things that you're doing where people can download? So do you have those guides on your site, those white papers on your site where someone can download to give them a checklist or to give them information that they can make smarter decisions as it relates to where they're at within their financial planning process? And then bottom funnel on the content strategy, and this is the last thing we'll cover here, is really what are the systems to convert people into your practice as a client. So what are those one pagers that you have that educates them as it relates to your process, how you work with people? Do you have a pitch deck that you can send to people before or after that initial meeting or that second meeting that talks about your practice, that helps educate them on what you do and also to helps nurture them throughout that sales process? So how can all this content come to life? We usually think about content, there's only three ways you can consume it. You can read it, you can watch it, or you can listen to it. So from that perspective, you could create articles anywhere from 350 to 2,000 words on your blog. Google, if you want to try to optimize for SEO, Google likes the more words, the better. So usually things that over 1,000 words rank better from an SEO standpoint. How are you structuring that blog content? Videos, short, punchy videos do very, very well. If you're creating a longer video series, and you're sharing that on social media, how do you break that down into smaller chunks of clips or of different assets that you're sharing out over the course of a week or 2 weeks or whatever the cadence looks like. And then also too, this could come to life in presentations and podcasts. So really thinking about what is that ideal customer profile look like? And then also too, what do they like to consume and what type of media do they like to consume? So we'll jump to distribution just in the interest of time. So why we love digital distribution is because it gives you the ability to get high exposure at a lower cost. So traditionally, as you think about the advisor marketing experience, whether it's your seminars, your educational seminars, your direct mail, your golf outings, whatever the case may be, those experiences that you were creating historically are very expensive. And also too, you're limited to how many people you can have at those experiences based on the cost of that event. So from that perspective, why we love digital distribution is because it allows you to get that high exposure at a much lower cost than you would if you were to do an in-person experience or an in-person event. It allows you to reach new markets with Facebook targeting, LinkedIn targeting. From an advertising standpoint, you can get to a place where you're targeting 30 to 40-year-old parents in the Detroit area. You can get to a place where you're targeting pre-retirees who are Tigers fans. So from that standpoint, you can really get very focused on who you're going after, what you're trying to convey, what message you're trying to convey to them. And it allows you to really reach the right people with the right content versus just kind of pushing out your content and hoping that it works, or pushing out your content and hoping that someone sees it. Digital also allows you to build a community. So how are you building that community, and not necessarily a community in the fluffy sense, but community of value? How are you sharing newsletters with clients and then they're forwarding those along to individuals on a regular basis? And then also too, digital allows you to really humanize your practice. Historically, if the only time someone would understand who you are as an advisor if they met with you. Now with video and Zoom and digital, you're allowed to really build out a humanized practice in a face to the practice's name. But they also allow you to capture demand, influence research, and drive conversion, which is why we're a big fan of digital channels. So what does your digital channel mix look like? What should that look like? What can that look like? Again, it goes back to what is your ideal customer profile like to live on? But really from a digital channel standpoint, your top of funnel channels are your website. We view the website as a distribution channel due to SEO. It's Twitter, it's LinkedIn, it's Facebook, it's paid Google ads. Paid Google ads can go more mid-funnel, but a lot of the time they're kind of that top to mid-funnel research phase. It's SEO, it's topical SEO, local SEO. It's COI relationships between the events that you're throwing with individuals, and it's digital partnerships with local businesses. So the way we define and advise on how you should think about your digital channels outside of defining your ideal customer profile is that certain channels are better for certain audiences. So Facebook, you can't get any organic reach on Facebook, but you can leverage paid in a very cost-effective manner. It's great for the pre-retiree community. The reason why is that the fastest growing demographic on Facebook is that 50-plus-year-old, and they're not as conditioned with social media. They didn't grow up with social media. So this whole scroll past mentality isn't necessarily as prominent with that older community. So from that standpoint, Facebook is a very good channel to go after that pre-retiree community on a regular basis. LinkedIn is a very good channel to go after a corporate ideal customer profile. So someone who's either a corporate executive or is within a specific industry. And that's very good for LinkedIn's very good for niche targeting. We can send out a YouTube training that we have where it essentially shows you how you can build your brand on LinkedIn more effectively. Twitter's great for niche marketing. So if you're trying to go after a tech community or, maybe it's the Detroit tech scene, which I know has gotten very hot over the past few years. That's a place where you can go after these micro communities of niche and topical based interests on a regular basis. So when you think about your top of funnel channels, what does that mix look like? What are those 1 to 2 channels you need to live on to be able to attract people into the practice? Your mid funnel channels are your newsletter. It's your emails, it's your webinars, it's your downloads, it's your contact points for prospects and clients. And then your bottom funnel channels are the prospect, our emails, client appreciation events, win back campaigns for those individuals, etc. So what could your cadence look like if you're doing digital marketing as an advisor? So what we usually recommend is you map out what your content calendar looks like. You map out what your cadence will look like. So on a daily basis, you could have daily social media posts. We don't necessarily recommend advisors have to post every day. But if you're going to double down on a channel like LinkedIn, you should aim to build your presence there by posting unique, original posts on those channels a couple of times a week. The next thing is, how are you integrating paid ads into your marketing, your marketing mix? So how are you leveraging Facebook paid ads or LinkedIn paid ads to either build the brand or drive leads into the practice? You can do these in a very cost-effective manner. Facebook, you can get away with spending anywhere from $15 a day and up. LinkedIn is a little bit more expensive. $25 a day and up is really the baseline minimum. Google ads gets a little bit more expensive depending on how you're targeting folks, whether it's local or topical. This could be weekly website content. So posting once per week onto your blog or once per week onto your YouTube page. It's not necessarily about volume content. It's about the depth of quality of content that you're putting out. And you want to have a regular cadence. So you don't want to necessarily do once per quarter, but it doesn't have to be on a weekly cadence, but really get to the place where what's comfortable for you as an advisor and what's comfortable with your audience to consume. And then also engaging with these people. A lot of marketing strategies are just voicing your opinion or pumping out content, but miss the concept of social media. Digital marketing is about engaging. So how are you engaging other folks within your ideal customer profile? How are you engaging your audience, posing questions, commenting on content they're sharing, keeping that feedback loop going? On your monthly basis, you could do a market recap video shared with clients and prospects via email. That could be a monthly educational webinar that you're hosting for clients and encouraging them to share that with friends and family. And that could be a monthly newsletter. So newsletter cadence is a question we get a lot from advisors. You don't have to have a newsletter every single week. We actually seen in the data that monthly is a really good cadence of when the consumer wants to hear from their advisor. But you want to get to a place where what does that content look like and how is it different from what's out there based on what you're creating on a regular basis for those folks? And then finally, quarterly, what does your client appreciation events look like? What does your community involvement look like? And then the biggest thing that we see advisors actually doing well at right now, for those who are doing it well, is what are those win back campaigns that you're running for prospects who fell off in the process? Maybe they weren't ready, as bad timing. So we have a very specific 2-prong win back campaign strategy that we have advisors go through. But essentially it's going back out to those folks who fell off in the process to re-engage them and get them back into the sales funnel. So how do you measure digital? So a big thing is that, okay, this is all great. I can create a lot of marketing. I can do marketing, but how do you actually measure it all? How do you think through what is your measurement framework? And similarly to how you wouldn't want someone to measure you off a quarter as an advisor on their financial plan, you need to think about your measurement from a marketing perspective in months and years versus days and weeks. So from that standpoint, and it's not just about, at the end of the day, how many leads you're getting into the door. That is the biggest element, leads and close rates on those leads. But what you need to do, especially when you're first starting out, is how are you improving your brand awareness? Are you increasing traffic to the website, qualified traffic to the website? Are you increasing your search impression share on Google from an organic search impression share standpoint? Are you increasing your network on social media? Are you getting better press coverage because you hired a PR firm? So from a kind of, it all trickles down. So how are you improving the brand awareness as the advisor that can eventually trickle down into engagement on the prospect side? And then once you start to measure those top of funnel metrics, how well are you engaging prospects? Are you driving more webinar signups over time? Is your newsletter list growing? Is that leads generated list growing? So are you getting people qualified to your website? And then are they actually converting into known users? And then also to how are you servicing clients? A lot of the time we forget about this idea of asking for feedback from clients. So we have a baseline survey that we have advisors send out to their clients, or just ask them what kind of information that they want to consume from their advisor. How can they serve them better? So making sure you're keeping that feedback loop going with clients. So obviously follow your compliance guidelines, know the rules, follow the policies, use approved content, get your content approved, review everything before posting. Obviously work within the compliance guidelines of your home office, or if you're using an external compliance party. But at the end of the day, your checklist can look like as follows. So you interview your top 10 to 25 clients to really understand their needs, their tendencies, what they're looking for from a content perspective. Then you create your content calendar. So from that standpoint, what is the content that you're going to create? What is the cadence? What are the topics you're going to cover? And then also two, what is the mediums that you're going to create on? So is that video, written content, or voice content? Identify at home for this content. Is going to live on your blog, your YouTube page, etc. And then really figure out what channels you want to distribute this content on. Does it make sense for you to live on LinkedIn and be distributing through LinkedIn versus only email versus only Facebook, or is it a mixture of 1 to 2 to 3 channels? Identify resources for writing and budgeting. And Ashley, if you want to get into some of those questions, we can dive into them. So who's going to lead the charge on your content creation? How you actually develop the time to create content on a regular basis, getting your systems in place, and then just start to make sure you're distributing and executing consistently, in measuring your impact over time. So we can open up for questions. You can either email me at acavallari@signinvestments.com or alex@the7group.com, signinvestments.com, and then the7group.com is the marketing side of things. And I'm super active on LinkedIn, so happy to go into Q&A.
Thanks so much, Alex. I would just like to kick off the Q&A with a couple of questions. First, I saw you had a screenshot showing how to measure the engagement level. How long should you be looking at your campaigns? What if the first one you put out, doesn't get a lot of engagement? How consistent do you need to be, and what sort of runway do you need to give yourself to really get some sort of quality metrics?
Yeah. So to your point, the quantitative data is going to take a fairly lengthy time to actually come to life, right? It's going to take months to start to understand at a volume basis, distributing content. How is that impacting your web traffic? How is it impacting your social growth? The best thing that we usually have advisors start with is getting anecdotal feedback from clients in the content you're creating. So that's quite literally asking clients of, hey, I sent this piece out last week. What'd you think? Is there anything that I can change? What would you say I should think about next time? Or are there topics that you want to hear about? So when you're first starting to distribute content, start with distributing it to your clients. And then from that standpoint, ask for anecdotal feedback. Be very proactive in understanding what the feedback is that clients or your audience has on the content that you're creating. The second thing I would say is early days, look at the depth quality metrics versus the volume metrics. So what I mean by that is when we think about marketing, we think about volume numbers traditionally. So we think about how many people came to your website that month, or how many clicks did you get on a piece of content, or how many impressions did you have on a LinkedIn post or a Twitter post or a Facebook post. What we like to think of is think about it a little bit differently early on, is look at your depth in terms of if you post an article on your site, it's not necessarily how many people consumed it, but how much time did they spend on that article? Did they bounce right away, or did they go to another page within the concept of that piece? So from that standpoint, really getting to a place where early days you're measuring depth quality and you're getting anecdotal feedback. And then over time, you're going to be able to start to measure more of those volume metrics.
That brings up another question, and I think it also kind of piggybacks off of Doug's in the chat. So what if your clients aren't used to looking for you on social media? What if they didn't find you that way and now you want their feedback on this kind of stuff? Um, I guess, how do you drive them to start getting in the habit? Do you ask them to follow you, or, how do you go about that? And then I guess to go along the lines of Doug's question, I think from a lot of firms, market commentary is fairly, more traditional. So if clients are used to seeing that, do you continue to do that and then do this in addition to that? Because as you can imagine, the bandwidth is going to be stretched.
Yeah. So in what topics, for anybody who can see, Doug's specific question was what topics gain the most traction with clients and prospects? Agreed. General market updates, and even not only general market updates, but like your foundational pieces of, the 5 things you can do before you hit retirement to think about retirement income, right? Like that has been done and done and done and done and done. That lives on forever. So the biggest thing I think that you can start to think through is, what is the specific topics that ideal customer profile will care about, in the sense of, if you're going after the corporate professional, they're going to be the corporate executive. They're going to be between, I don't know, 35 and 52 years old, right? That's going to be like the sweet spot of that corporate exec who's probably built some wealth and they're probably doing it on their own, but they need to start to look for an advisor. So from that perspective, start to think through, like, what are the big life events that they may have? And then how can you back into your content creation that way? Because you usually have a ton of life events that are happening in that instance. What we've seen play really well is advisors who are taking those traditional life stage topics and adding a unique flavor based on either their personality or what their firm's personality. So what I mean by that is, if you obviously have to have like your traditional evergreen content on your site that can be that library, but what lens or what point of view do you have that can help someone think differently than if they were to read it on another advisor's website? So that really gets back to like, what is your unique value proposition on a specific topic? So that's the first thing I would say, is if you have that evergreen content backlog that you're creating, is how can you twist it, change it, and make it different from what you see out there traditionally based on the value prop that you have as an advisor. So for example, we work with an advisor out in Seattle who essentially, they have a very research oriented lens. Like they're all data nerds. They're all like very big into that element. So everything that they create and all the clients that they work with are on the engineering side, and they're very data oriented themselves. So they create a lot of quick hit, chart oriented, punchy pieces that they just rip out to clients, because those clients love to actually read that type of information. I think if you find yourself creating content, whether it's market commentary or educational stuff, and you're at the place where like it just feels vanilla, think about, how can I break this up, change this or twist this in a way that can give a little bit more flavor for my audience, that will differentiate me from another advisor.
I think that makes sense. So I guess for some of the firms that might be associated with more compliance heavy, that might be handcuffed a little bit more, and, maybe all they're allowed to do is, piggyback off of some sort of predefined offering, like a Snappy Kraken or FMG Suite or something like that, where you see the same articles being posted across, multiple different advisor profiles. I mean, do you feel as though, do you have advice for those individuals?
It's a great plug for Seven Group. That was not planned, by the way. But so here's what I would say is that, so Seven, for example, every advisor can download their content from our platform. And then what we usually recommend is we produce a lot of library content, but then you can download it as a Word doc, add your own voice. So you can twist it 20%, tweak it 30%, or just change the whole piece, but you have like the foundational items in there. And then put that on your blog. So it's really your own piece, but we're giving you kind of like the core points you need to make within the piece. So that's just a good plug. If you don't want to create your own content, you can, check out Seven. But anyway, so what I would think through is, if you are going to use a third party, or if you're going to do your content creation internally, whether you're using home office content or using a third party, how can you get to a place where if you have to use this out of the box content that you cannot edit or you cannot tweak, aligning with your compliance team to when you're sharing that content on social or you're promoting that content, how can you add your own flavor on the post itself, right? So from that standpoint, how can you get to a place where whether the content's foundational, your social post, literally the post copy that goes on LinkedIn, what flavor are you adding on it to drive people into that content with your own unique point of view? So from that standpoint, working with your compliance team to figure out like, what's the customization that you can create on content that you have that's out of the box. And if you can't create customization on it, aligning with them on what guidelines can you have to create more unique posts into that baseline content that you're creating.
That's helpful. I guess, when we talk about subscription services or even 7-Group or anything like that, what kind of a budget do you recommend for some firms to spend on all of this? Because, for a lot of people, this really isn't speaking their language at all. Like whether you're talking about just content creation or even just reading the metrics.
Yeah. So I can't remember the exact percentage. So, and I will do some research on it, but I think traditionally advisors spend sub 5% on marketing. So I think it's like 2% or 3% or whatever the case may be. If anyone knows when they want to type it in, like Michael Kitces puts this research out all the time.
Right.
When you look at other industries, so when you look at fintech, you look at SaaS, you look at consumer products, people are spending 10 to 20% at minimum of their budgets on marketing. So I think the first thing before you enter the budget conversation is that where we're seeing advisors really do marketing well is that they're shifting their mindset as it relates to how they think about marketing. And it's not a cost center per se. It's an investment that you're making that you're going to expect an ROI on the back end. Like you should expect some type of return on investment, not in 3 weeks, because that's not going to happen. But in 6 months and a year, you should be seeing momentum from what you're producing or creating or distributing on a marketing side. So it's the first thing is, how do I change my mindset as it relates to the investment I'm making in marketing? And is there flexibility within the budget to go from a 2% allocation to a 6% or an 8% allocation based on what I want to accomplish for my firm? So that's the first thing that we usually recommend is like audit your current spend system. And if marketing's 2% and you want to increase it to 8%, what are the trade-offs that you have to make in order to do that? The second thing that we usually say is that from a marketing perspective, so you have your services, right? Like we have a 3-tier subscription on 7. We have like for the do-it-yourselfer, it's like $74.99 a month. Then you go up to $199 a month. Then you go up to $750 a month for like the top tier. Generally, you're going to be for an external marketing partner within the advisor space. You're going to be anywhere from like $100 a month to, I think they can get up to like 4,000 or 5,000. That's really for like the agency model-esque. So that's how you need to think about your budget ranges for the marketing partner end. The third-party tools, Snappy, us, the FMG all fall within that world, or within that budget range. The other thing you need to think about, in addition to the partner budget side, is one, are you going to need any additional resources to create or edit? So do you need to hire a freelancer to actually edit in addition to hiring a partner? Or is the partner going to do that? How much are they going to do? So if you're doing video and you're creating a video series, you can go to Fervor or Upwork and hire a freelance editor for $25 to $30 an hour. So from that standpoint, that's a second bucket. So you have your partner, you have your kind of, if you need any additional cost as it relates to editing or creation. And then your third is your ad spend. So usually you should, if you're doing a marketing strategy correctly, you're going to have some type of spend, whether it's event spend, if you're doing in-person events, or ad spend, whether you're doing digital or whatever. So from that standpoint, it depends on the channel. So as I mentioned before, if you're doing Facebook advertising, you can get away with spending $15, $20 a day at the minimum. So, I mean, you could even go down to 10 and get good reach, but 15 to 20 bucks a day will get you very good reach on Facebook. Because you can get a very broad audience and it's the cheapest platform to advertising on. That's just how it plays out because they're targeting. LinkedIn you can't get away and get the right reach on LinkedIn for less than 25 bucks a day. Because they charge a premium for their job title targeting, for rightfully so. And the fact that your list, you can upload contact lists and company lists, and LinkedIn, you can get like very, very, very unique. And it's just a different audience in terms of who is on LinkedIn. So that you can't really get away with without spending 25 minimum bucks a day. Google ads, you got to think through. Google ads can get expensive. Google ads is a great channel. We use it for Cyan and Seven. But from that standpoint, if you're doing like Financial Advisor Detroit, that can get very pricey. That can cost anywhere from $18 per click. And I bet if we did the research and I pulled up my screen, you would see like 16 minimum or 17 minimum, all the way up to $32 to $35 per click. That's just per click. So from that standpoint, if you're doing local Google ads, that gets very expensive very quick. So you have to mentally budget thousands of dollars on a monthly basis. If you're doing topical, so if you're doing like retirement income planning, or you're trying to run Google ads against topical keywords, it can be more cost effective, $5, $6, $7 per click. But what you need to think through is if you're bidding on retirement income, for example, you're competing with BlackRock, you're competing with Fidelity, you're competing with Vanguard, you're competing with every big major player out there in terms of voice or share on that Google ad spend. So think about if you're doing topical Google ad strategy or you're partnering with someone to do Google ads, I would only do local ad targeting on Google. I would only do if you have a very big budget. I'm talking like 1,500 plus a month to spend. And if you're doing topical, think more about those long-term keywords. So not retirement income, but retirement tax planning strategies for small business owners. That's too long, but thinking about like what's the more in-depth topic that you can bid against, where the volume won't be there, but the quality of visitor will be there from people who are interacting with that.
Makes sense. The other follow-up question I had is some of the things you mentioned, and I think it kind of goes well with Doug's comment too, is, what if you're maybe nearing capacity for your firm and you're just looking to kind of really enhance your presence and your credibility? Like, does your strategy change at all for that? And I guess, to Doug's question, at what point do clients end up feeling spammed if you're posting too much?
Yeah. So the first part of the question, just
if you're really at capacity, maybe you can't really take on additional clients and you've kind of written marketing off, but yet you've seen this movement to digital marketing and you want to stay relevant.
Got it. Okay. So the first part of the question is like, if you're at 100, so a lot of advisors shoot for like that 100 household mark. They're like, I want to serve 100 households and I'm good. Right. They want to do a lifestyle practice, or they want to have, 100 million in AUM and then they're good. If you don't necessarily want to market to gain new clients, what I would say, but you want to stay relevant with your current client base, is really focus on what is your newsletter strategy and what is your quarterly client event strategy. And when I say event, that could be digital or in person, but like those are like the two things, right? So newsletter strategy, is it a once a month newsletter that you're sending out to clients? Is it a once every 2 week newsletter? They need to determine the frequency versus you. And I'll get to answering Doug's question in a minute. But if, like, for example, we have a few 7 members who all they do is leverage us for newsletter content, and they just use it to they don't want to bring any more clients on, but they want to continue to build the affinity with client. And if they get a referral here and there, that's great. So that's where I would say is if you're trying to focus on, if you're at capacity, but you need to stay relevant, what's your newsletter strategy look like from a marketing perspective? And what does your event strategy look like for clients on a quarterly basis? To Doug's question is, can you post too much content to where clients and prospects feel that they are getting spammed? So it depends on the channel. And I know that it's always in a depends answer. If any marketer is giving you a straight answer, they're feeding you a bad bag of goods, but depends on the channel. So on social, really you can post too much. Like you can get to, if you're posting 3 times a day, like you're spamming your audience. Like on Twitter, you can get away with posting 3, 5, 10 times a day, but on LinkedIn, if you're posting 3, 5, 10 times a day, like that's very aggressive. So it depends on the channel. The reason why it depends on the channel is because life of a tweet is like 15 minutes. So you can tweet 5, 6, 7 times a day, and people are basically going to see your tweet, and then they won't necessarily come across it 6 hours or 7 hours later. Now they have a what you missed for people that you follow very frequently, so that can add up. So Twitter, you can post, your frequency can be higher there. LinkedIn, what we usually recommend is 3 to 5 times a week. So LinkedIn, an everyday posting strategy is good. That's not too much. Obviously that takes, carving out, and we're very big on time blocking, like time blocking your first 30 minutes of your day. But from that standpoint, LinkedIn 3 to 5 times a day. Facebook, you're not going to get any organic reach. Their platform is not built for organic anymore. It's only built for paid. From a corporate page perspective, so like your practices page. Personal, you can still build the brand from a corporate page perspective. So Facebook, you could do like you just don't want to have a graveyard on your Facebook page. Like you could do once a week, but leverage Facebook for paid at the corporate level, not organic. And then obviously like Instagram, if you're going after a millennial audience, that could be once a day. I'm not a big TikTok advocate for financial advisors, even though you see that out there a lot, but I'm not going to get into that because that's a whole thing. That's the frequency. Newsletter, and I think, Doug, this gets to your point. Newsletter, we've seen monthly newsletters play the best in terms of cadence. You're getting hit from your advisor. It's not too much. It's expected on a cadence. And then video series, what we've seen from a video or podcast series standpoint, releasing content or even a blog once a week is really that ideal sweet spot. But once every other week is another sweet spot as well.
All right, well, thanks. I'm sure this ends up generating some additional thoughts and ideas and questions. I'm sure we'll have your email to available to our member base should they want to reach out to you. One more time, I'm sure, Michelle, we can maybe make that available to everyone. But otherwise, where can they find you, Alex?
Yeah, so the7group.com to check out the marketing platform, sioninvestments.com to do more information on the investment management side. We have a podcast that we release an episode every week. It's called The Advisor Lab. It's literally everything like this. This is the spiel I go on like pretty much every week with thought leaders, industry experts, out of industry experts, all advisor based. So Advisor Lab, it's in Apple Podcast, it's in Spotify. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Alex Cavallari. Find me on Twitter at Al Cavallari. I am as active as you can get, as Ashley and I have been connected, and she's probably saw, but I'm pretty much as active as you can get on those channels across the board.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex. And thanks, Luke, for, helping us link the connection here to get Alex's presentation. And we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.